It's been 1 year since I installed raised beds from 4 different companies, and today I'm going to show you how they've all held up. Most product reviews are reviewing brand new products, and that can be really useful in its own way. But when you're buying something that claims to last 20 plus years, then these long-term reviews are what's really going to give you the information you need to make the right decision. These raised beds have been through an entire year of wear and tear. They've been through rain and sun and storms. They even went through Hurricane Helene. So today we're going to actually get a good look at how they've held up over the course of the year. And to be honest, I was actually pretty surprised when I came out to evaluate these and saw some of the things I saw. So today we're going to be going over these company by company, and because this is an update review, we're talking about specifically how they've held up over time. I'm not in this video going to get into the nitty-gritty details of the construction and the packaging and all of that stuff. If you are interested in hearing those things, I will link the original video that I made up here. We're going to start with Vego. So this is the Vego Classic 9-in-1 in the color terracotta. And let's see how it's held up. All right, first things first, we're evaluating the outside. We're looking for any scratches, and if there are scratches, how bad do they look? Currently, there's really minimal scratching on this raised bed. Now, I'm somebody who is pretty careful, but also I have had to run my lawnmower through here and pass the raised beds, and I think that they're not super prone to getting scratched up, so I think that's a positive. But also, one of the things that these companies claim is that their material is sort of self-healing. So if it does get scratched, it actually sort of repairs itself in a way that it's not going to rust, even though that outer layer has been scraped away. And to be honest, I can't really tell you if it's doing that, but I also don't have any information to prove them wrong. The few scratches that I was able to find on this raised bed absolutely did not show any signs of rust. I've also been kind of surprised by how well the bolts have held up. They are shiny, they look great, they look brand new out of the package, to be honest. It's really hard to find anything wrong with them. The inside of the raised bed, especially when you dig down under where the dirt line has been, it still looks super clean. I've seen other metal raised beds where you start digging below the soil line and you just start seeing some of the decay and the rust. But these look, I mean, if you brush away the dirt, it still looks brand spanking new right under there. The only part of this that I think really shows any wear and tear at all is the rubber edging. And it's not so much that it is wearing out, it's that it is getting just a little bit dull and dusty from being in the sun. And also it appears to have shrunk up a little bit. The ends that were touching when I initially put it in, they seem to have pulled apart a little bit. The good news is I do have extra. They gave me plenty of extra, like an entire 12 inches or so. So I can definitely cut another little piece and insert it in there just fine. And it'll look a little newer than everything else, but at least all the edges will be covered. With raised beds like this, it's also really important to check for bowing, as in the dirt on the inside being so heavy that it causes it to sag open, sag outwards, because there's no opposing force on the outside pushing back against the dirt that's inside, pushing outside. You get it. So if we look at this, it looks pretty darn straight still to me. And I'm betting a lot of that is because the cross supports are in there, holding it together right there in the middle, and they are doing their job. So for Vego specifically, before I had this raised bed, I actually bought this one with my own money before they'd ever asked me to review anything. And this one is coming into its 4th year in my garden. So let's see how this one compares to that one that's only 1 year old. We've got a dent here, probably from moving around when we were putting in this pergola, if I remember correctly. And you can see maybe just a little bit of damage to the paint there, although now that I scratch on it, some of that's coming off. So that looks pretty decent. It is just a tiny bit scratched in some places. Overall, this one is a bit more scratched up than the other one. Definitely, I run my mower right along the edge, especially when the weeds are getting really tall in the summer. But it seems like that hasn't even scratched through the top layer of paint. We're not even scratching all the way down to the actual metal in most cases. And the places where you can see the metal actually poking through, I honestly see zero signs of rust. If we dig down to the bottom of the bed where it's been in contact with the dirt and weeds and stuff for a while, I also can't see any sign of any sort of damage whatsoever. No rust, no discoloration. The paint isn't even wearing off, and it's not even really faded in the sun. Like you would expect maybe to see that it was darker where it's been covered and more shady compared to the parts that have been more exposed to the sun. But even with this really dark colored painted one, the color has maintained its vibrancy throughout the years. There is a tiny bit of dulling on the bolts that are a little bit deeper down when you dig down. But again, there's no real signs of rust or degradation of any kind, even in the bolts that have been fully covered with soil this whole time. This one does seem to have the same problem as the other one, where the rubber edging has definitely shrunk itself a little bit. But in general, the rubber edging is in really good condition. And, you know, this particular gap is hidden by a plant, so I'm probably not even going to bother fixing that. There's also no fading on this particular rubber topper as well, and I think that that is because the one that comes with the terracotta bed is actually a brownish color, and then all the rest of them are black. And I'm thinking whatever coating they put on it to make it brown is probably what is being UV bleached off, because it looks a little bit blacker on the top where the brown one has kind of worn off. So looking at that, for me currently, the Vego bed is checking all of the boxes. There's nothing I can say to really complain about it. Now we're going to move on to Vegega, and I do also have two beds from them as well. I have the one that I set up last year, and then I have another one that is another year older than that. So not quite as old as the one that's coming up on its 4th year, but this one is coming up on its 3rd year. And then the other one that we're going to look at is on its 2nd year. So we'll go ahead and start with the newer one. This is the 2.0 version. This is the one that has the trapezoidal sides from Vegega. And if you saw my other review video, I talked about why they claim the trapezoidal sides are even stronger than the wavy ones that we'll see on all the rest of the beds. And because of that, it is supposed to resist bowing better than other shapes. So if we look at it, we can see it is still pretty darn straight, in my opinion. I can't tell with the naked eye that there's any deformation going on at all. And this is actually one of the shapes where there are no cross supports anywhere in here. You can set this up in a bunch of different shapes, as I'm sure you know, and they provide cross supports for the skinnier ones like that. But when you set it up in this shape, the cross supports just simply are not long enough to accommodate it. And so this is actually without any internal support. The walls themselves have just held up over the course of the year. So I actually really struggled to find any scratches on this one at all to evaluate. The little baby one that I did find, it looks like it's just a very minor scratch. Again, there's no evidence that the scratch actually damaged the integrity of the coating, and I'm not seeing any signs of rust. I didn't see anything when I dug down. And additionally, the bolts on the inside and the outside, they all look great. And again, this one had the same exact problem with the rubber edging at the top, kind of shrinking back a little bit. But again, that's not a huge problem, and maybe that's something that I can tell you as a new buyer to just cut it a little bit longer than you think, or really squish it back as you're cutting so that it doesn't have any room to shrink. So this Vegega one behind me, this is the only tiered raised bed that I have, and this is the older one, so let's see if it has any signs of wear. This one honestly looks to be in just as good shape as any of the newer ones. Again, the bolts look great, the paint looks great, there are scratches, but none of them show any rust, and there's no visible signs of bowing anywhere in the bed. All right, so Vego and Vegega, they are very, very similar companies. Their raised beds are made almost exactly the same way, but let's dive into something that is a bit more different. We're gonna look at the Anleolife raised bed. So the construction of this one, on the surface it looks the same as the others, but it's actually different in a few key ways. It does have a slightly different coating on it than the other beds, and the bolts are different, especially these ones at the top. They're wing nuts instead of cap bolts. And then of course the support bars in the middle are made of a slightly different material. And I can already tell on these support bars that this is showing a little bit of rust here at the top. In a lot of places on these beds, you'll see kind of a dirt stain in places, but to me, this looks very much like rust. And if we look here at the connection point, you can see there's even just a little bit more there. Even though the bolts themselves look fine, it's this metal that is starting to rust. We can see it on the other one as well. And unfortunately, we can't look specifically to compare to the supports in the other raised beds because the positioning of the supports is different in this bed than in the others. In the others, the supports are much, much deeper, and I would have to dig very close to the bottom of the raised bed to be able to see them. And because I have plants in there that I don't really want to disturb their roots that much, I'm not going to be able to do that for you, unfortunately. But these ones, the ones that we can see, it's not looking good. On the plus side, any of the scratches on the surface and also the bolts themselves are not showing any signs of rust. I'm assuming that for the support bars, they didn't actually get the full dip, the full treatment that the outer panels did, and so that's probably why they're starting to rust. Those support braces are doing their job though, and there's no visible bowing in this one. If you'll remember, this company also offered the biggest size raised bed. You cannot get a raised bed that is this big from any of the other companies. You can kind of see it in comparison to the Vego one there and the Vegega one there. So it is unfortunate that parts of it are starting to rust. And if this one's starting to rust, let's check on our budget option, shall we? This is the Kesfit. This is by far the cheapest option out of all the raised beds that I've been reviewing. And let's see if it stands up to any of the tests. So honestly, this one is surprising me the most. Compared to the rust that we saw on the other one, this one actually has no signs of rust. Even at the base, even in the bolts that were covered with soil, even underneath the little rubber edging, there's really no damage to speak of. The only thing I think that really sets it apart as a budget pick is the fact that the inner coating does appear to be ever so slightly fading, or I guess kind of like cracking. I'm not really sure. It's not cracking because there's no texture to it, but the visual of it looks a little cracked, and I am worried that, you know, in a couple of years when we do another update, that's going to be the place where it's going to start failing. We also have the same thing that we saw on the other raised beds with the rubber edging, where it has kind of shrunk back a little bit, and we do have that gap now. So given all that, I think the ranking is pretty easy. I think we can still put Vego and Vegega together at the top. I don't see a ton of differences between the two, even before this, but especially after this, they seem to be essentially the same. So, you know, pick whichever one you like. The Anleolife one, unfortunately, it is rusting a little bit. And so, like, overall, while it still seems to be in good condition, it's definitely showing the most wear and tear out of any of them so far. And so that one I think would be at the bottom. And then the Kesfit one, for a budget pick, it's really not doing so bad. We'll see in a couple more years whether or not it actually is holding up. By the way, subscribe if you don't want to miss that. But so far, I can't really say that it's not worth it, especially for the price point. All right, and remember, if you do care more about all of the individual features of each of these raised beds, you can definitely check out that video up here. I'll also link it in the description, and I think I'm gonna link it also right here on the end screen, just make it really easy for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.